What I'm going to talk about today is network lifecycle. Most terrible, most boring topic. But first, who am I? So I'm Michael Winston, Director of Network and Security Architecture at Fiserv. I'll tell you a little bit about who Fiserv is in just a moment. There's my contact information if you want to follow up, if you want to talk to me afterwards. I've got a lot of interesting ideas. You can notice my IE number matches my age. January 9th of 2000. It was a day I'll never remember. And I had to build my own cage. I didn't know the difference between straight through and crossover, which is great because when I talk to the kids today, like, straight what? Okay. So first, who is Fiserv? So Fiserv is #1 in the IDC FinTech ranking. We processed last year $2.3 trillion worth of transactions, debit, credit, payment, ACH. We're the company behind the curtain anytime you do anything that has nothing to do with cash. So whether you're using a bill pay app or Zelle or Clover, or if you're a merchant, if you're a bank, if you're online, it doesn't matter. We are somewhere behind that. So my team is responsible for designing product selection for all of the new products that Fiserv uses throughout the network in order to make your infrastructure more secure. So I do want to start off thanking everyone in the room and everyone who's listening for being a Fiserv customer. Not that you really have a choice, but thank you anyway. Okay. So let's start with something scary. iOS XE, 34,000 devices found compromised by Orange and their CERN, which primarily looked at in EMEA. 34,000 devices compromised. How many do you have? I don't know. We have 15. No, I think we have 30. It's important as we go through this. It's a recurring theme. Cisco said that you don't even notice that the device has been compromised because it's not a change on the config. When they compromise the device, they compromise the firmware, they compromise the OS. So unless you're doing things like MD5 checks on the iOS that's running on the box, very hard to uncover, very hard to pull that defect out. Okay, that's all right. We don't have any iOS XE. We're a Arista shop, right? Or you're a Juniper shop, or you're any other vendor shop. Well, that's okay because their software, as complex as it is going to have CVEs and defects as well. So if you look at the last 12 months, and this is from CVE.org, you'll see there's over 6,000 just when I did the keyword search on Cisco. And not to bash Cisco, but predominantly they're in what everybody's environment, so it's going to be the biggest landscape. That's why all of the malware and viruses target Windows for the same reason. So, how many devices do you have? Well, we didn't know. We had an idea. So what we did was we built a full automation onboarding, offboarding process focused around forward networks, Autobot, and some other automation platforms. If you look at the flow, the wire flow diagram on the screen, you'll see we have all of our forward supported devices. Now, great thing about forward networks for us, supports all our platforms. And I have yet to hit a networking vendor that's like maybe not a real niche. So our SD-WAN vendor, Versa, supported, Juniper supported, Arista supported, AWS, GCP, Azure, all of it, which is good because we're in all of those different places. I'll talk a little bit about this more later. By the way, if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand and interrupt me. Go ahead, Tom.
So I noticed you've got forward on the chart, and you also have Autobot. Considering that they're both kind of network sources of truth, is there a reason why you're using both?
So that's a great question. So when I think about intent-based networking, there's different components to it. So there's some place where you have to express your intent. This is what I want the network to do. Now, what I want the network to do is kind of like what I want my kids to do. They don't do it. So I have to have some way of validating that the actual expressed intent in Autobot is what's showing up in the network. So forward networks is my validation engine. So the configurations that were pulled back whether via SSH or API. Oh, and one thing I heard somebody mention more than once or state more than once, the agent. There's no agent in forward networks. It doesn't need anything loaded on your box. It uses SSH or API calls, and it doesn't matter if that box is on-prem or if it's virtual or if it's in the cloud. If there's a way to get to that platform, then you can access that platform. One of the other important points I want to highlight about forward networks for us that was a real differentiator is the support for jump hosts. And how many of you have networks that are segregated? Oh, you can't get there from here. Well, how do you manage the device? Well, we SSH to this jump host. Okay, forward can go and use SSH to get to the other parts of your network. The other thing that was really important for us is the native support for network address translation. Because like many other companies, we used all of the RFC 1918 space, and then we liked it so much we used it all again, and then we used it all again, and then every company we bought also used all of the 1918 space. So support for network address translation, support for jump hosts, makes it much easier to have a forward networks deployment that doesn't get to 60% like many other management discovery tools. So if you don't know how many network devices you have, you don't know whether your environment is compromised, you don't know whether your device is following your standards, you don't know, okay? Now, if you don't know, then that's okay, because I'll tell you, you can see by the color of hair, I've been doing this for a really long time. Every enterprise I've been a part of has this same problem. And it's not the engineer's fault, not the architect's fault, not leadership's fault. It's because the network is an organic thing. And every time you plug in a new cable, configure a new VLAN, build a new BGP peering relationship, no matter what you do, your network is constantly changing. So even if you have a dedicated team of tech writers who are trying to keep up with that, they're always lagging behind. And chances are you don't have a dedicated tech writer team, or maybe you did at one point, but they got cut due to budget cuts, right? So then your network engineers go, well, I'll go and do the as-built diagram afterwards. After what? Because normally it doesn't happen. Or if they do an as-built diagram, then someone comes along later and changes it, and they don't know to update the diagram. So it's important to understand you have to know how many devices you have. Why? Why do I care? You know what? My network works, it's all connected, I got packets flowing everywhere. I don't really need to care. Well, you do, because you see what I mentioned before, CVEs, the iOS XE. My son said something to me over the weekend when I was talking to him about this. He goes, the good guys have to be right 100% of the time. The bad guys only need to be right once. That's it. It only takes one hole in your environment, whether it's a CV on a Cisco device or it's a ACL that's facing the internet that just doesn't have any lines. So it doesn't do anything. It doesn't matter. Your network is exposed, and if you don't know how many devices you have, then you might as well just assume it's already been compromised. So the other thing about this is it also helps you with your audit and compliance. So because we are a financial services company, we are very, very heavily regulated. And when an auditor comes, sits down at the table and asks a question, you go, well, I think it's this. After they go, no, I don't want to hear what you think. I need to know what it actually is. Then there's this mad scramble to get all the Visio diagrams and copy all the configs and give a pile of paper to the auditor like this, which they don't read and don't understand anyway. So when you're looking at why you should care, negotiating your support agreements, you want to freak out any of your strategic sourcing people, walk up to them, whisper quietly in their ear, true up. You say, go like this, right? Now, when a vendor comes to the table to do a true up, they drop a pile of things on the desk and go, you have 25,000 of our widgets. And the leader, strategic sourcing guy goes to the engineer, is that right? The engineer goes, sounds about right. And then that costs your organization money because you don't know which devices have been decommed. If you're a service provider like we are and you're shipping devices to customers, even harder to track whether those devices are still available or still online. Also reducing the landmine that causes outages. Everything in the network is interconnected. If I change something in a data center in North America, something in Australia is going to fall over. Why? Well, because we started changing a prefix list to redistribute a route that suddenly flooded the table of the really old Nexus 5K somewhere in Sydney. That was the core of an environment. And this is not what actually happened to us, but it's close. And 34,000 routes, the device went, oh, I can't take anymore. It fell down.
So
Now,
you're saying that the platform can detect when you are expanding your network and you may have misconfigured something in BGP and caused a service outage for 6 or 7 hours, hypothetically speaking.
hypothetically speaking. So one of the great things about this, and someone mentioned it before, is when Forward Networks pulls in information, it doesn't just pull in configs. It looks at the entire network state. The entire network state, including the routing tables, the MAC tables, the ARP tables, the CAM tables, all of the forwarding information in addition to the config. So it's not just, there are so many tools out there that'll do a config scrape and say, oh, this looks like a mistake. Well, yeah, but you're not taking that in perspective to the broader picture of the environment. Forward Networks does that for us. Now, right now, I don't have a way to analyze those BGP changes proactively unless I write an NQE, which we write a lot of NQEs. And one of the other things that was mentioned before about how the information gets updated. So Forward Networks creates snapshots, and our environment has over 20,000 plus devices. And our snapshot does take about 2 hours to do collection, do processing. But what you can do is you can create a workspace with a fewer number of devices and do pre and post change validation, pre and post capture. And as Mike mentioned, that's something that we're working into our automation flows, which is what the last piece is, automation enablement. I didn't need another screen to look at because everybody's got a single pane of glass. I've got the whole cathedral ceiling up there. It's beautiful, but you don't know where to look, right? Single pane of glass turns into a mess. So with automation enablement, one of the things that Forward enables, because everything is API accessible, is the ability to build custom portals, to build information that extracts it and presents what the engineers need. So we've got a tool the NOC uses called IP Finder. They type in any IP address, host name, FQDN, doesn't matter. And it goes right to Forward Networks, goes to our CMDB, our IPAM, all of our platforms, presents it all in one place. And that information, again, with Forward Networks makes it much easier to understand what's going on in our environment. So we realized that, well, because your information is in there, my information is in there, that we need to take care of Lifecycle. We need to know exactly how many devices we have. So we turned Network Lifecycle into job zero, not job one, not priority one. It was the only thing that a number of our engineering teams worked on. We built a Tiger team focused on this with automation engineers, cloud engineers, network engineers, firewall engineers, security engineers. And then based on the outcomes of what these teams looked at, we built a number of automation platforms to, and we say this internally over and over again, reduce the cost of data. There's a real misconception with automation, based on my experience, that engineers really need automation to push config. No, actually, I don't need automation to push config because in reality, how often do you get a change approved to change 1,000 devices all at once, right? Come on, no, not gonna happen. What you really need automation to do is say, well, I'm gonna go and create VLAN 10 on this switch because I checked the 10 switches around it and VLAN 10 wasn't on there. By the way, there are 12 switches. Oh, I didn't know there were 12 switches. And when you enabled VLAN 10 on that trunk, and the way spanning tree was configured, you just created a spanning tree loop, which you didn't realize when you closed out the change because it takes a while for a spanning tree loop to build, and then the network falls over, and then no one knows why.
Question from the we're talking about the Tiger team here on the automation engineering. Were you able to embed or pull in any software engineers to help the team as they wrote these automation or built these automation platforms?
So our automation team follows a CI/CD pipeline. They're agile. They do minimum viable products. They do sprint-based feature releases. It's run really very well.
Mhm.
And from my perspective, they were just as good as software engineers, but they had some networking knowledge. Now we do have a few on the team who are coders, who write Python code or Ansible code or whatever language Go that they happen to be using. But the team is a mix of people who have networking knowledge and who are primarily software developers, but they all work in the same agile way. All right. So how does Forward Networks help us lower the cost of data? One of the things that Mike also mentioned is the support for all these platforms. All right. So in Mike's demonstration, he showed an outage that was happening somewhere in AWS. Imagine in your environment, because I know in our environment, we have Azure, we have AWS, we have Google, we have Juniper, we have Arista, we have Cisco, we have wait 5 minutes, there'll be another vendor show up. So one of the things that Forward Networks does is it paints everything vanilla. So I don't need an expert in that particular area to be able to answer a question about a BGP peering relationship between a Cisco and a Juniper router. You don't need to know Junos and know iOS or iOS XE or NXOS or wait a few minutes, there'll be another type of iOS out, I'm sure. So in addition to lowering the cost of data through not needing an expert, supports all the platforms we have. We are in every cloud because that's where often we meet customers. We have a lot of cloud work that we are doing to meet customers in the cloud. And now going back in my memory to Cisco Works 2000 days, again, showing my age. Anytime you wanted information out of Resource Manager Essentials, we learned how to break in the backend database from write our own SQL select statements. Cisco didn't like that. And every time we'd call for support, they'd say you're using it in an unsupported way and they'd hang up. With Forward Networks, what really attracted us is that network query engine. Everything that's in the data model is accessible through an NQE. And everyone I know can write a simple SQL select statement. It's not that hard to write an SQL select statement. And with the NQE, and as Nikhil said, they're developing AI, so you won't even have to write an SQL statement. You just say, show me all of the devices running NXOS that have this IP address subnet or have this VLAN or this Ferve for any of that information. And it lowered the bar so far, even our strategic sourcing team can use the platform. By the way, I'm going to get back to the Office of Senior and say, I'm never buying anything for you again because I heard you mention me more than once. All right. So, did I skip them? Okay, no, I didn't. All right. The other thing about Forward Networks is a lot of other platforms have methods of network discovery, CDP, LLDP, or subnet scans. Forward Networks has all of them. And because, as I mentioned before, the support for jump hosts, the support for so many different ways of authenticating, the reporting for so many different ways of pulling the configuration, one of the things that Forward Networks did for us is it gave nowhere to hide. Every device in the environment can be identified, every device in the environment can be found, and getting that information out, you'll see there's a little snippet of the discovery configuration screen. We can go in and we can find everything. And the reporting data that comes out gives us an idea for the devices we can't connect to. Is it an authentication issue? Is the connection just time out? Is the device connected still over TDM? Because we still have TDM. And the pullback took too long. So it gives you the ability to really pull in everything in your environment. It doesn't limit you to just one method of discovery. How else did it help? It gave us a trusted source of truth. Now when someone in leadership or sourcing or an engineer or a security architect or security engineer or anyone asks how many fit this profile, we can get that information out from an NQE. We can get the information out from the inventory. Now, I don't like the term source of truth very much because everybody's got their own source of truth. No, Nautobot's a source of truth. Well, Nautobot is where you express your intent. Forward Networks is a source of truth. Well, it's where the intent is validated. CMDB, ServiceNow, that's the source of truth. No, only if you're interested in access management. So for me, it's just different types of systems of record. Now, everyone, if I ask, right, how many people trust their CMDB after they finish laughing, like, oh, CMDB is not a source of truth, it's a source of lies, right? So one of the things that we did was we got our CMDB team to now start taking the feed from Forward Networks and Autobot, so we know the information in CMDB is correct. I know the version of iOS or NXOS was not typed in by an engineer who added a dot or added parentheses or left off a letter. Now I have that information being gathered by machines, and those machines don't make arbitrary decisions on how to express a version or a platform name or a serial number, also very important. So all of this comes in. One of the other things that was very helpful to us is we use a lot of tags or decorators or whatever you want to call it. And those tags enable us to now say, I go into an NQE, how many iOS ISR 4Ks does the client team have that have this subnet range that are connected to this head end? Hold on a second, write an NQE with those pieces in it, and I get back definitive answers. I get back information that I can easily click. There's a link right there when the information comes out. Download to an Excel spreadsheet. I don't even have to worry about formatting a CSV with the separators not always in the right place, and sometimes the columns don't line up. Download it right into an Excel spreadsheet. Or, as Mike demonstrated, save that query in our NQE library. And we've got hundreds now of NQEs that we have written or engineers have written to get that information out. Makes it very simple. Again, lowering the cost of data, making the data available to everyone, and making it so that you don't need to be an expert in every part of the technology to be able to get to that information. And then going back to Tom's question earlier, we have Autobot. Autobot's where we express what our intent is, whether it's NDSS security standards or our Fiserv standards, whether it's control plane, data plane, or management plane. We can put that configuration information into Autobot. We can use the configuration information stored in Forward Networks. And we are now generating reports which go to our partners inside our technology leadership and say, here's the list of devices you have that don't have the right TACAC server. Here's the list of devices you have that don't have the right banner. Here are the list of devices that you have, go on and on and on. So what does this mean? This means for us, we can now automate all of this reporting. And automating all of this reporting means the information is always there. It's always available. We do our collection and processing. So, one of the things, I don't even mention the path analysis. That's a great part of it. For us, what's really important is the ease of access to the data, the ease of access to collecting the data, and putting this into our automation pipeline so that we can go ahead and integrate this with, you'll also see Potential. We're in the process of deploying that as well. And all of this integrated together helps reduce the cost of data, reduce the number of ICBCs, reduce the time it takes to resolve an issue, because we don't have to do that research. One of the things we're working on now is whenever somebody opens up an incident, whatever the device the incident is all about, go and fetch information from Forward Networks, gets attached to the ticket. Standard things that engineers do, right? Configuration, routing tables, CAM tables, ARM tables, all that stuff. Attach it right to the ticket. The devices that it's connected to. So that this way, during an incident, they don't spend 20 minutes, half an hour first trying to connect to all the devices. Wait, somebody have the password for that one router? I can't log in because, well, it's not configured in ClearPass. So how do you know that? Well, because I got it in my Forward Networks report yesterday. That let me know that that device is not following our standards. Automating your lifecycle process, by the way, is the only way you'll be able to get it done. Okay, so the outcomes we enjoy. We now know our network. We don't think, we don't hope. We know what our network devices are. We know that there are devices attached to our network that we are investigating aggressively to figure out what they're doing, where they're connected, and we are in the process of disconnecting devices that no one will know, no one will identify. You ever do a scream test in a live network. It's a lot of fun. We're also enjoying the ability to quickly identify events, quickly remediate those events, because the information, again, easily accessible. Even as what was mentioned about level 1 people in the NOC, they can use the path analysis, they can use the NQEs, they can use all of this, and they don't have to be experts in every technology.
I have a question for you. Can you talk about your path to get there with forward networks, like learning curves, training, the process changes you need to go through, and how you develop those processes? Did forward networks help you out with that? Like, what was that path to get from not having this information to now being up here and raving about what you have?
So the process was really good because Forward Networks acted like a partner, and they provided a lot of training for us. We do bi-weekly office hours for all the engineers on NQEs and how to write them. And again, someone from Forward Networks does that. So they didn't drop the software off and run away. We also use it as a SaaS platform, which for anyone you hear SaaS and network data, you get the shivers and shakes. For us, because Forward Networks was able to support customer managed keys, which is a requirement for us whenever we use a SaaS platform, so that I know I'm controlling the encryption of your data, not some other vendor goes, yeah, it's encrypted, trust us. So Forward Networks helped us with that. It took a lot of senior leadership pushing. It took a lot of effort to pry the information from the engineers' cold, dead, angry hands, because the tribal knowledge is what makes me worthwhile. Well, that's good, because once we get all your tribal knowledge, you're going to have to demonstrate your worth another way. It makes me crazy, tribal knowledge. The processes took a year. This was not an overnight, we flipped a switch, we put Forward Networks in, and suddenly we have utopia. This was a long and painful road. So for most of 2023, I looked like, what's that character from South Park with the hair all shooting out here and going like that? Yeah, so I kind of looked like that. Did I answer your question?
Yes, yeah, thank you. Especially with the timeline, the 1 year.
Yeah, it took us about a year to get there.
I missed something during my demo. I was so excited that I fixed
Because
the
I
problem.
was here?
Yes, because you were here.
That's what I
My
thought.
favorite person on the face of the planet.
I know.
But I forgot to go and do this. Another troubleshooting name game blame solved by Forward Networks.
That is one of my favorite gifts, because we always have that. No, it's your stuff.
Yeah.
No, it's
And
your stuff.
there it is. No more finger pointing.
No more.
Well, I mean, we learned was last week. There's always two conference bridges. There's the one where the work gets done and the one where the blame happens.
Yes.
All right. So who has any follow-up questions on any of the presentations that we saw that you didn't get to ask yet?
I have a question. As far as the channel partners, do most of your sales go through channel partners, or do they go direct?
Most of it is direct today,
Most of it's direct.
but we do work with a few channel partners.
Okay. And then I also wanted to compliment you on the Forward Quest. I've been playing it in the background, which is a great way to learn about your software. So
That's
Great
great to
idea.
hear. Thanks
Yeah.
for the shout out, and encourage everyone to try it out, because this is an opportunity to just get your hands on the platform direct. This is not a video that you watch. It's not a blog post that you read. You actually get to play with the platform, and in a fun way, because it's actually a gamified version of the platform where you have specific tasks that you execute, that you accomplish as a network engineer, as a security engineer, and so on.
So one thing to follow up on that, they've also recently added to the NQE engine self-help learning NQE, so you can actually go through progressively and improve your NQE skill just by using what's built into the platform, which makes it easier for network engineers or newer engineers to quickly adapt and pick it up.
So Michael mentioned that you use the 10 space multiple times over, and I've been there. It's painful. How does the not just NQE, but how does a platform as a whole present or manage that overlapping IP address? So, like, if we're saying, well, what's the path from 10.x to something else, but there's 4 different 10.x's that it could be, how do you normally approach that? Is that an easy fix is just like, select your VRF or something, or
So you can select VRF and other more specific information in your path analysis, but one of the things that the platform does, so for us, we have between multiple segments of our environment, we've got the NAT border where it happens, and depending upon the perspective of where the information is collecting from in forward network. So we have, it only requires one collector for our environment. We've got over 20,000 devices. And when that collector pulls in the information, let's say it's sitting on a side that is 10.x, and the other side on the NAT border, that same IP address that's also 10.x is translated to an 11.x or 12.x address. When Forward Networks pulls that information in, it represents it based upon the localized information on the other side of the NAT border.
Okay.
So knowing which perspective you're looking at it from, and it can be confusing. And we did that to ourselves, but it still has the ability to easily identify, and because it supports the NAT border, whatever's doing that translation, it also gives you the ability to look at, here's where the flip is actually happening from, 10 to here, going to the other side becomes 11, coming back, the other side becomes 11 talking to this side, or something similar to that.
So would you say NAT is confusing?
I would say NAT is the worst invention ever, but it is also the thing that we need because we are terrible at managing our IP address space.
Amen.
I like him.
Said by
I got one question about, again, sorry, Michael, I'm big on you. You mentioned that, it takes like 2 hours to get a snapshot of the current network, and you're running a single, I know we said agent, whatever, controller, device to go off
Collector.
and pull all that data.
So
Is that something that's, because one of the questions I was going to have earlier was, well, how often does this state of the network refresh, right? And that's particularly useful with post-change. Yes, you can pick a set of devices, that's useful, but it's also good to realize very quickly, I screwed the thing in Australia, which I might not have thought to put in my subset of devices to monitor because I didn't expect to mess up another region, right?
So you can schedule the collection process to happen once or more times, as many times as you want it to happen within that 24-hour cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So we have our collection process happen twice a day. We have our engineers build workspace networks to get that smaller piece. So it's important to understand the way Forward works. So there is a collector that sits on premise, and that is the only thing that connects to all of your network infrastructure. From their SaaS platform, it doesn't connect to any of the devices themselves. It doesn't store the credentials used to connect to the devices themselves. That's all stored on-prem in the collector that we run. It's just the software that runs on top of a Linux box. It's not really a heavy lift. In the SaaS environment is where all the processing takes place on the information that's pulled in. So because of the size and complexity of our environment, what's really great is because Ford does it as a SaaS, they can expand and contract based on the amount of resources they need, as opposed to if we had built it on-prem, we would have had to have, lots and lots and lots of servers with, they tell us that our processing takes terabytes of RAM to do because of the complexity of our infrastructure. So imagine trying to get your compute team, I need 4 hosts that have 6 terabytes of RAM each. You can get in line, you'll be waiting a really long time.
Right. And they're only going to utilize that RAM twice a day,
Yes.
which they love that.
They love that.
Low average utilization is just wonderful.
That's why it makes a lot of sense to have it as a SaaS.
So would you say the time is taken in the collection or in
Processing.
the processing?
It's in the
side?
processing.
So it depends on the environment. For them, it is primarily processing because of the complexity of all the NAT layering that happens. That's one source of complexity.
Right.
For some of the other customers, it's relatively simple. So the bottleneck then becomes how quickly we can extract the data from the devices. So we've seen instances of those as well, where
something that's scalable as well. So rather than the one server that's allowed to grab data, can you scale it up to multiple so you can suck the data in quickly and then throw it up for processing?
it is possible, but then we go very wide actually. So we don't, again, like the collector machine or that process is not really the bottleneck. It's just the I/O to get to the devices. A lot of the time, it's just waiting on the data to come in. So that allows us to go really wide. So we actually go as wide as we can to collect the data. It's the slowest device that becomes the bottleneck typically.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah, it's not serial in the way that it
Yeah.
goes out and reaches
Yeah,
the
you're doing
devices. It
multiple, yeah.
fans out and hits
Okay.
a lot of them.
So are the collectors distributed geographically?
One collector,
One collector
one collector.
and only one box? There's no redundancy?
Well, so again, the information that we actually use in forward networks is in the SAS. The only thing the collector holds is the information it pulls in that's then sent up to the SAS. So if our collector falls over, which it hasn't, and we have the platform for 18 months, the collector is really stable, it doesn't matter because we can still get all of the information in forward networks because it's the analysis and the final output happens from the SAS platform. We have in other locations, in other data centers, collectors that are standing by waiting to be activated if we need to. And we've gone through the DR simulation process with forward networks. And because the flipping of a collector on depends on whether you want to immediately run a collection or if you're just going to turn that other collector on, just turning the other collector on and reconfiguring the infrastructure, it takes about 30 minutes to an hour tops
And does it keep historic information?
in the cloud. So one of the other things, and I heard it mentioned before, is every snapshot is stored in a workspace. So you can actually, in the NQE, compare multiple snapshots through API, or you can also look at, there's some really cool dashboards that'll show trends over time based on information from multiple snapshots. So it stores that historic data.
And one concern I have then is how much bloat you have with the historic information stored in the cloud.
SAS, I don't care. I don't care how much disk he uses.
And then we also have a mechanism to garbage collect. So,
Okay.
so the idea is, as you go back in time, you typically don't need the data at the same fine granularity at which you collect it. So, right, I mean, like in let's say in the past month, you need every snapshot that you collected. But if you go back in time, you may need just once a day, once a week, once a month as you go back, so we can pare down that.
Okay,
So
good.
that we have that garbage collection in place.
Yeah, there is a roll-up process. So if I go to look at a snapshot that's from 2 months ago, that has to be reprocessed because the processing information, because snapshot was that long ago, has aged out.
Yeah, that is the other part. Actually, it's a really important part, which is we have collected data and we have analyzed data. It's the analyzed computed data that is much larger than the collected data. The collected data is basically a bunch of text files, heavily compressible. So we can actually get rid of the computation because it can always be rerun. That's another way to save storage.
This is Greg again. We've talked about the largest networks that y'all have. What's the smallest that y'all are dealing with currently?
We have the whole range. We have some of the small ones as well that are like a few hundred devices. Typically, I think that's where the pain starts to become pain of network management starts to become big enough that you need software to help you manage that network complexity. So I think that's where we start seeing that pain. If you have maybe just like a dozen devices, that's probably not that hard to manage that. So 100 or so is when we start seeing that that flip happening.
Having this single collector that has access to all the devices on your network and all the different networks, what kind of security risk can that potentially pose to, your devices, having all your credentials into this single device?
Are you asking me or them? If you're asking me, I'll say I don't really see it as a security risk. The collector sits behind a firewall, and there are specific firewall rules that allow it to go in and out. We have agents, our own internal agents, things like CrowdStrike and other stuff that run on the collector that are always doing analysis to make sure that the platform hasn't been compromised. All of the credentials are stored fully encrypted on the device, and regular network engineers with regular permissions on the device can't see, because we use service accounts in order to log in from forward networks rather than an individual user. they can't get that information. So when you look at it, the only person who has access to that is our forward networks administrator. And we've got right now one man who does that, and it's fairly light touch.
Well, plus I suppose the accounts only have read-only privilege.
They do have
on
read-only
the
privilege.
device.
Yes, that's
At least they can't go and destroy because they're not making changes.
yes, that's a big point. All of our service accounts that we use with forward, they're read-only.
Right.
Except in some platforms that are so immature they can't distinguish between read-only and read-write, or the privilege level is set wrong. But in most cases, it's read-only.
So question back on the collector deployment. So is the only option to run one active collector? I mean, for example, if I have a collector in a data center and I make a change and that data center is no longer around, I got a DR. Is there any option to run multiple active collectors, or is that something you're looking at?
We are working on a collector pool, which we can have multiple active collectors at the same time. That's work in progress.
So we had that same concern
Yeah.
when we first onboarded. What do you mean there's only one collector? We have 20,000 devices. Our devices are all over the world. How can you do this with only one collector? And 18, almost 24 months in, one collector. It works fine. There's no issues. There's no scaling issues. The collector itself is not really that big a machine from a VM perspective. And in the times when we've done the DR test, the redirect, not very painful. And because the analysis information is what you really care about, is stored up in the SaaS, then it doesn't matter if the collector goes away or not. And we've got devices in India and Sydney, and our collector is in North America. So the average round trip time is 200 plus milliseconds. Works just fine.
Can the platform or collector also do subscription to any streaming telemetry events, or is it mainly configuration grabs via SSH?
Right now, we don't have support for streaming telemetry. What it does is it can do SNMP polls to get statistics to be interface and device statistics like CPU or packet counts to be overlaid on top of the paths that you see. So we have that ability, but streaming telemetry is something that's not there in the platform today, but can imagine it will be there in the future.